Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
How to end wind knots forever. A couple different things you can do. There is some misconceptions, or are some misconceptions. We don't have proper English here, Luke, on wind knots. And so we're going to talk about it because we see it a lot, both in our community, on Facebook. You get newer anglers, even experienced anglers. Nothing worse than having a wind knot. So got Joe Simons, like diamonds, and
Luke Simons. And yeah, we're talking about spinning gear. So wind knots with spinning gear. And there's, for many years, I actually misjudged the cause of them. And I think a lot of other people are as well, because I talk to members all the time. And there's a very common issue that's super easy to overcome, to the point where you'll never have wind knots again after learning it this way versus treating the symptoms like most other people do. Because easy, some people talk about the line lay. Obviously, you don't want to have line that's like too high, like this reel. But even then, or like line twisting, that is another common cause of wind knots that people say. But if you're using braid, the twisting of braid doesn't really matter, as long as you focus on the core things we're going to talk about. Even if the line lay isn't perfect, or even if your line's twisted up, you still shouldn't have any wind knots.
what about over spooling though?
Again, I'm super aggressive with my spooling. Like this is one of my reels I'll be using for the demo, and a lot of people recommend that you have it's the line gap. I'll try to for those watching to show it, but this is basically the gap between the edge of the line and the top of the spool. A lot of people recommend to start with 1/8 of an inch, which is about what this is. And this is as far as I ever let mine go. I like to have it where I never wanted to go, obviously never go above the spool, right? Never have it going way out here. But I like to get that gap as little as possible, because that is what controls your casting distance. So the more gap you have, the less your casting distance. But if you go down to no gap, you're going to have a big risk of wind knots. But as long as you have just a slight gap and you do the things that we're going to talk about, even being aggressive with your line lay for maximized casting distance, your risk of wind knots are going to be very low. I'm super aggressive with it. Yes, I do get wind knots on occasion, because if you don't, you're not maximizing your casting distance by putting on more line. But again, they should be very rare, and even when they do happen, they should never have to be cut off. There's some easy tricks to make sure that you never have to cut your line.
What about different brands? I've seen people that swear that this brand is just prone to getting wind knots. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, and again, that's somewhat true, but even still, right? It's a lot of it's a little bit bad mechanics, or just it's not so much mechanics on the caster. It's not focusing on which direction is the wind going, and making sure that you're not in violation of the wind knot problem, which is when the wind is going straight at you while you're retrieving. It's not the casting, it's the retrieving of the line. That's where the wind knots happen. The cast is where it is actually seen, but the retrieve is when it's actually started. And I used to think about the cast I must have been casting it wrong. I had a improper retrieve the cast before the wind knot.
All right, so let's repeat that and let's talk about that for a little bit, because I think that is probably one of the bigger misconceptions.
Yeah,
because that's always what I thought too, that it was about my cast, or I was casting into the wind, or had too much of a lob. And you're saying it's not the cast at all, it's the retrieve.
Yeah, the retrieve. So when you get a wind knot, the wind knot happens during the cast, obviously. That's when you're not, basically, and what a wind knot is basically, normally the line is going to shoot off the spool one strand at a time. And what causes a wind knot is if there's a strand that is loose and some tighter ones on top of it, when that line is shooting off, the line coming off is going to actually snag, or kind of grab onto a loose strand that's buried underneath of it. And now a whole ton of it shoots off all at once, which is what the wind knot is. And so as long as you don't have as long as you're mindful to not have any weak spots, like any non-tension zones in your spool, you won't have wind knots, even if you have very little line gap. And so when that actually happens, so I'll go through a couple of calls, I'll actually show you one of them. So a lot of people get them, and at the end we'll talk about, I guess we can talk about it now, but if you do get a wind knot, there's some just, again, quick things to think about to help you know what caused it. So if you're getting a wind knot, which is what a lot of people do, and like when you get it and you're pulling line out forever, right? When the wind knot happens at like with the full length of line out, like a full cast length of line out, that means that the knot issue happened right after your lure landed in your very first couple turns. That's very common, and how it happens. So let's say you just make a cast, right? Bail's open, and their line just keeps going out, and then it goes under your spool. And if you don't flip it manually, a lot of people just automatically start reeling. And check this out. So I literally didn't help it at all. And you see this line over the spool, it's super loose. And if I start now reeling under tension, now I have this tighter line coming onto my spool with this loose line out here. When I make a cast, all this loose line is going to shoot off. And now I've got a giant knot. And it's way back in my spool too, right? Those loose lines are at the very, very farthest part of my cast. So that's when a lot of people, and that's the most harmful one, because now it's more prone to knot if you have like all that line. Like this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say I have four different coils. If all four of those go off, that's gonna have a pretty high chance of knots. Now I've got to cut off all that line, and now I've cost myself a lot of money, because if you lose 150 feet of line, that's going to hurt your casting distance going forward, because now you have more of a line gap.
All right. So how do you prevent that one? Just
Sorry, I don't understand.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now.
How do you prevent that one?
So prevent that one, let me just take this thing out of here. So to prevent that is I recommend never using the reel handle to start the line, because I just did it again, right? It's because it's very easy to happen. But the fix is even easier, and it's just to do it manually. And now I got myself in a tangle here because of all this stuff. So instead of flipping the bail with the handle, and I actually was going through some video footage, and I noticed I do this every single cast, no matter what, like instinctively. But after the cast, lure lands, flip the bail, and then I'll actually move the line with my hand up. So I just have a habit of just doing it. And so I literally feed the line into the roller bearing with my reel hand, and then I start reeling. Obviously, there's a lot of line because I pulled a lot out. If I actually did have this much line out, then I would always hold my rod up here and just kind of have finger tension on the line until I at least get some, get all that slack out of there. I got a bunch of stuff on my desk that's getting caught on. But once you start having your line going through the guides as normal, especially with a lure or live bait or something under tension, and then you're doing a straight retrieve, it's like almost impossible to have a wind knot. So long story short, when you make your cast, right, the line's shooting off, use your hand, flip the spool over, and then even better is to just build a habit of just kind of pushing the line up into the spool. That way, you've at least tightened your line around the spool. And even if your line is, hopefully you can see this, my line is kind of bowing out. Even with this bowed line, once I start reeling, just even the tension of that line kind of hanging down is enough to come onto the spool pretty solidly. Like it shouldn't have any wind knots. But especially when that knot is under the reel and you flip it with the spool, again, boom, there's a wind knot. If I didn't fix that, if I just kept reeling in, my next cast I would basically lose a full cast length of a line. So that's the most common issue of all. Obviously, it doesn't happen every time, but if that line is, and it's usually with the wind, right? They're holding the reel out like this. They make the cast. That line is now being bowed toward the fisherman, and you do that, boom, you just created it. So
It was interesting that every time you just close the bail by using the reel there and not doing it manually, every time it did it just popped. It's
but I'm using gravity to make what the wind does, right? So I'm just using gravity to have that line, but it goes from the reel down and then out. Gravity's doing it now, but if you have your rod like this and the wind's coming at you, it's doing that same arc. And so if you just trigger it, you're gonna start that wind knot at the worst possible spot, because now you've got 150 feet of line that's out there behind it.
Don't use your handle. And as Luke said, you see the wind knot from a cast, but it's from a prior, time that you're reeling in or doing something like that, where you're using the handle to set the bail over.
And I'll clarify that, because it's not from a prior cast, it's from the prior cast. So like I used to think, oh man, like I must be doing something wrong, like maybe a few casts ago. No, it was like the exact prior cast. That's when something went wrong. And then based on how much line is out before your wind knot, that is the part of the retrieve that the issue took place. And so usually people are doing one violation. It's rare that somebody's making like all of them. Granted, I've made all of them over time, but again, if you have the wind knot and there's a whole cast length of line out, then focus on the mechanics of closing the bail manually and making sure that tension is on the line on your first couple turns. Because once you have the lure providing tension, that's very rare that anything happens, unless you're doing a twitch style retrieve. That is the cause of issues when maybe half of a casting distance is out. It was basically midway through your retrieve, and that you're probably doing a twitch going facing into the wind, and that same scenario happened where you make a twitch and then you start pulling in line without any tension. You're rotating the reel without any tension, and boom, I just did it right there. Another one.
And you're saying that's if the wind is coming at you?
Yeah, again, because wind knots, that's how the term came up, because it's usually when you're facing the wind, that's when wind knots typically happen. I, for many years, thought it was because I was casting into the wind incorrectly. I was retrieving into the wind incorrectly, and I was basically letting the wind create that issue, where that wind, on the end of a twitch, there's no tension on the line, and that wind starts moving the line beyond the reel, and now you start taking it on without any tension. Right? Tension will make sure that line is at least fairly tight. But if that wind is pulling it towards you, especially if it gets below the actual reel and you start reeling, you're going to have a wind knot. And again, based on the distance of the amount of line above the wind knot, that's how far out the lure was when you made that mistake, the cast prior on your retrieve prior. So I never thought like that. Like I never knew how to really dissect it until actually, like, a member was asking a question actually, and when we went to Texas to see the chapter, members having like chronic issues with wind knots, and I started, okay, well, like at what point, how much line was above it? Mm-hmm. And then like, as we were going on, I was like, okay, like this actually is pretty easy to dissect. I just never really bothered doing it.
So how do you prevent that one with your?
Is just make sure if you are going to have the best way, if you're casting into the wind, is use a lure that doesn't require a lot of rod twitching. So like a paddle tail, weedless spoon, something where you can just cast it and retrieve it. Because if you're doing that, it's almost, I should say it is impossible. It's almost impossible to have a wind knot if you're casting a lure, making sure those first couple turns don't have some loose spots. And if you're doing a straight retrieve with a lure that has some tension, you won't get wind knots. You can cast into the wind all day long, no issues. If you're using like a twitch lure that does require some twitching, where you're basically pausing, which gives the line some time to have some potential loose spots, you just want to make sure that you have your rod at an angle to the wind so that it's blowing the line, I guess, to the side. You just don't want it blowing directly at the reel to the point where it gets below. Where it gets below, that's when the biggest issues happen. But if you're having issues, the way to almost certainly get rid of them is if you're casting into the wind, use a lure that can get strikes on a straight retrieve. because then you don't have to worry about it.
Cool. What are some other reasons or ways that people are getting wind knots?
I mean, it's really the retrieve. It's really as simple as that, and it's something that's been overlooked by myself for many years, as well as others, because it always happens on the cast. So you think, okay, maybe I should have done a sidearm cast. I should have gone overhand. That doesn't matter. So it's just make sure that every time for every turn of the spool where that line is getting put onto the spool, you just want to make sure that there's no weaknesses. And so doing a constant retrieve with a lure that provides some tension will guarantee you won't have wind knots. And then if you are using, again, a lure that does have some twitches, is just be very mindful on those twitches when you start up again, because it's going to happen when you start up again. That's when that line is going to be soft. You just want to make sure, maybe like lift your rod, do something that ensures that as this spool is turning, as this bail is rotating, that there's at least some tension. It could be wind tension, but just at least some tension on the line to make sure that there's no loops. It's really simple as that. So it's not as complex as I used to think. And
let's go big picture here. So everything you said is spot on once you're fishing, but it can also start before you even make it on the water, right? When you're spooling up your reel for, let's say, the first time of respooling, right? If you take tension off, because that's happened to me. I had one really, really bad one to the point I just had to take the whole thing, like redo all my line. And I remember kids were coming in, and I literally stopped tension multiple times while I was spooling and like put it down, and then just, you know what happens, right? It kind of like, it doesn't look that bad, but like, maybe it'll be, and you just kind of tighten it back down. And that was like the one time I remember I had so many issues with knots.
Yeah. And it's the same, but the same premise is true, right? So like, you're spooling on, now I'm out of line for this thing, but you're spooling on the line, get distracted. Now that line basically is dangling down.
Yep.
So let's just say there's a ton of line out. Like right now, this line isn't going through the guides. In that case, right, pull it tight and then hold it with your hand that's on the rod, and then start reeling to keep the finger tension on it until you get to the point where it's now going up through the guides, and then you can go on with your reel spooling. So yeah, so whether it's getting distracted from the kids while you're spooling up the reel in the first place, or you're distracted by the kids while you're actually retrieving the lure, or if you're just doing a standard retrieve, like your favorite twitch pause retrieve with your favorite lure, if that wind is coming at the wrong angle, at least to the point where it's actually pulling the line towards you, to the point where when you do that next turn, it's that handle turn that's right after the pause. That's when the trouble happens. So as long as you're mindful to, before that turn, maybe start moving your rod up or something, just to make sure that you're pulling your line tight before that line starts coming on the reel, because that's what happens. And again, as I said before, right? If you do have a wind knot, they're going to happen, especially before you're kind of again. I guess I mentioned before, I rarely ever have them, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. But I'll even do a video about this. But I literally manually put the line right into the spool before I'd make my first turn every cast. And I think that's a big reason why I haven't had them in a while. So, just be mindful of that. If you do get a wind knot, I mentioned before that there should be some very rare instances where you actually have to cut them out. Many cases, hopefully, especially on windy days, you make sure to observe it. But let me just kind of try to force one again. But if you do happen to see a loose spot in your line, like I was showing before, that might do it. So if you see that, like a loose spot in your line,
mm-hmm.
do not, and now you have to pull it out. And I learned this, I think it was Captain Tyler out of St. Pete taught this, or maybe I can't remember who it was, but instead of flipping the bail and actually pulling the line out to get that loop, the best thing is to lighten up the drag and then pull the drag. Keep pulling the drag. And if you do that, no matter how big the loop is, like under the lines, and usually it's a pretty nasty one if you can actually see it, if you're pulling the drag out versus pulling the line off of the spool normally, the dragway will almost guarantee that you don't end up in a wind knot. As soon as that that loop gets close, the tension from your pull is actually going to straighten the loop out, and it's going to come out naturally, clean, no issues. So that was another trick that I learned a while back that has certainly saved a lot of line over the years from wind knot issues that happen.
And I think it was Captain Tyler, and he also did the chapstick trick.
Yeah.
So, chapstick has a little petroleum in it, and essentially putting chapstick on it and slowly start kind of pulling it apart. And it's wild how it works.
Yeah. And I'll say one last one too that Tony did, Coach Tony. And it's basically like if you get a wind knot, let me just try to recreate one. But if you have a bad wind knot, the worst thing you can do is what I ended up doing, where I would just grab the two main ends and say the wind knot's right here in the middle. I'll grab the two ends, the one going toward the reel, the one going toward the lure, and just pull real quick and just hope that it comes out. A lot of especially with 8-strand line, when it's very smooth line, it does come out a lot. Like I use that J-Braid 8-gram, but that's actually the best way to actually dig a knot in that you have to cut out. So instead of pulling out from the middle, you actually grab pulling from both ends, you grab a loop from the middle and pull that. Because what that's going to do, that's going to basically pull the loop, and it's going to basically pull all of those coils out much more frequently than pulling it from end to end. So pull from within the loop, like within the knot, grab a loop and start pulling that way versus pull the ends. Because again, I've learned that the hard way many times.
Is there a certain line that you have found to be more susceptible to wind knots?
I mean, really, it's really the lighter the line. So it's whatever line the wind can move the easiest. So like I have heard of people complaining about the line that I like the best, that 8-gram from J-Braid. The reason why I like it, it's very smooth, so it doesn't create tension while it's going through the guides. I've noticeably spooked less fish, like when sight casting with it, and it has good casting distance and knot strength. Just a good overall combo of all the testing I've done. Tested a bunch of different lines, and but it is fairly light. Like it's lightweight. It's very malleable, so you can twist this thing up a ton and like nothing really happens. Like you can see all these twists. I've used it. Like when we went to Louisiana, we were catching those bull reds. I took 10-pound braid out there, and every when fish are ripping drag out, that's just every turn is a twist in your line. And so my line was very twisted afterwards. I never bothered untwisting it just to see what would happen. And I've had no wind knot issues at all. So it's not so much the twistability of it; it's just how well can that wind move the line, and if it's pushing the line at the inappropriate angle, where it's actually again pushing it below your reel, and it's increasing the odds that there's going to be some loose spots in your spool, that's going to increase. But as I mentioned before, as long as you're mindful of the mechanics of what creates wind knots, and just make sure to not do that. Even if you're using very lightweight line, there shouldn't be any issues.
It's good stuff. Keep the tension. Yep. All right. So to recap, wind knots are not caused by the cast into the wind. It's the retrieval. And it's anytime you see a wind knot, it is from the retrieval prior. Like I wonder if there's any exceptions to that, or is it really always from that?
Well, most of the time. I mean, so when you do get a wind knot, so like when I get them, granted it's been a while since I've gotten to this point, but if I get a bad one and it's like where it's just a big glob, I'll rip it. I'll just grab it as hard as I can and just hope that it comes out. If not, I'm going to break it and then retie pretty quick. But sometimes when it gets really tight, it can create a little bit of a nick in the line where the line is a little bit distorted. And just that having a distortion inside the spool it could be enough to have future wind knots, right? To inhibit future wind knots. But again, if you're using braid, it has very low memory, so that generally won't be an issue. One thing I will mention though, and I recommend highly against this, is if you do get low on line and you want, instead of doing a full respool, you splice the lines together, where you get down to the tag, and then you tie some more braid onto it, and then spool on top. That's cool to do as long as that knot is buried under the line, even to the point where at the end of the cast you can't see it. So if you have a line splice that is like half of your casting distance, and meaning that when that line is shooting out, it's going to eventually impact. It's going to catch that knot. That is very bad. That is almost guarantees a wind knot. So if you do want to save money, which I do, I do the line splicing, but I always make sure to do it to the point where I can put on another at least 100 yards of braid on top of my line splice. So you do not want to have a splice in your braid like 50 feet into the spool, because that is going to be a nightmare that like every cast will catch. It's like the best way to get a wind knot every cast. But again, as long as you have those knots way, way buried below the casting distance of your line, there won't be any issues at all.
Cool. Makes sense. Well, super helpful. Hopefully this gives everyone a little bit different perspective on wind knots, on what causes them, how to fix them, how to prevent them. And if you guys have any questions or thoughts or experiences that you've had with certain lines or certain retrievals or any other tips like that, let us know down in the comments. But I thought this was super helpful because I never thought about that either. You always assume, it's like, once again, casting into the wind, or, having a just way too much loft, throwing a Hail Mary, cast. So that was good.
Yeah, and again, I just wish I would have learned all this stuff years ago, because I've definitely had many wind knots over the years, and a lot of which I treated improperly. So hopefully this will help save some people money. And yeah, Joe, you mentioned that loft cast. Yes, that's cool to do, but the loft cast will increase the odds that there's some slack in the line. So even when you're casting, recommended to not loft it, right? Do a proper angle that make sure that you don't have a bunch of slack line when you start reeling that in, because nothing worse. Wind knots are bad in themselves, but the worst ones are if they're buried, if they're caused from those first couple turns. And especially in windy conditions, I actually recommend to stop the line before the lure lands. That way it actually straightens out the line. So if the lure's going out and you stop it, even though the wind is bowing out the line, it'll straighten it out. It's going to hurt casting this a little bit, but it's going to at least make sure that you don't have to waste time or money dealing with wind knots.
Good. And maybe we'll do a future one on bird nest and casting reels.
Yeah, I'm a very frequent bird nester on bait casting now. Now that I don't use it nearly as often.
Stinking bird.
I'll be a good test case for it.
Yep. Cool. All right, guys, we appreciate you. If you haven't joined us in the club, what the heck are you waiting on? 2026, this is your year to catch more fish, to wow your friends, and ultimately just have more confidence out there, regardless if you're new, weekend warrior, or even pretty seasoned pro. We have people at every level in the club, 65,000 members, guarantee to help you save money and save time. So we have tackle discounts every day, all day. That reel that you were holding up, $50 off? We have one rod that's over $100 off now. So just in one purchase, you would more than pay for the membership. So
how much it is? I've been using the travel rod just so I don't have a full rod hitting the fan and everything. So this travel rod, the Slam Stick travel rod, if you do travel and you like to fish, this Traveler has been awesome. It's 7.6. It actually comes with a medium and medium light midsection, and then a moderate and moderate fat, or a fast and moderate fast tip. So you can customize to exactly what you're doing. But yeah, this thing has been absolutely awesome. It's brand new, and we have the medium heavy midsection coming out soon. So you can go from medium light all the way to medium heavy with one travel rod. It's pretty sick.
Heck yeah. Cool. Get all that at fishstrong.com. We appreciate you guys. Talk to you on the next episode. Peace.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.